you've got shared interests and shared experiences. I couldn't fall in love with someone who goes fox hunting or badger baiting. I couldn't do that. So you don't do those, do you? You don't go fox hunting on the sly at the weekend, do you? Oh, silence.
So I have been out hunting,
Really?
jag hunting.
Right, I don't have an issue with that. It's when there's a poor animal involved at the end of it, getting mauled.
I can understand why you feel that is.
Subject change.
Welcome to yet another episode of Scum Remover, the podcast for Sabs by Sabs. In this one, I speak with Lewis Keane, a member of Devon County Hunt Sabs and also a Labour councillor for Exeter. His name came to my attention following a Devon Live article in which he, quote unquote, outed himself as a Sab, though as you'll hear, it's not something he ever really tried to hide. We talk about sabbing in the West Country, the relationship between being a councillor and a Sab, and different approaches to the role of the police. Enjoy.
I think the thing that people get fussed about is that a fox is a small brown furry animal, very much like a dog. I don't think they'd be nearly so worried if it was a little four-legged car full of chips.
So I was always involved. So originally I was involved in politics, and there are a lot of Labour people involved in the Labour Party who are also strongly opposed to fox hunting, and it became something that entered my radar, and I became more and more aware of it. And I went vegan a year and a half ago now, and that's when animal rights stuff really came into my perspective on a far more regular basis, and so through the Labour Party and from being vegan. So I reached out to Devon County Hunt Sabs, and originally they actually told me to go away and go to well, because I was just random messenger, and I went to Devon Badger Patrol, and I got involved with the Badger Call, and I was patrolling. So Devon Badger Patrol they patrol on footpaths in fluorescent jackets, and that's it's a visual representation of a disagreement with the Badger Call, and trying to build up communication. So obviously we're in the area, we're very obvious, to the farmers, etc. And it'd be really good to have that conversation, and that's kind of the aim of Devon Badger Patrol is to have that visual opposition.
Yeah.
And then through there, I met a couple of Sabs, and I said hey, I messaged your Facebook page, etc. And then from there, really, I did my first Sab was a cubbing meet.
Okay.
Yeah, and that was quite extreme actually, because as soon as I jumped out the Land Rover, a terrier man kicked me. So
oh shit.
it was very much a jump straight into the deep end kind of.
Yeah, trial by fire.
Exactly. And then, gosh, 5 police cars turned up.
Yeah.
Because there was a high police presence anyway because of the Badger Call going on. So there was already police liaison on a higher alert or whatever. There was more officers in Devon than I think there usually are during other periods of time, especially in the countryside. So there was a lot of police. So it was very much something that I was kind of dumbfounded. I kind of had an idea that this sort of thing went on, but not to the extent that it did. And obviously cubbing is quite an extreme part of fox hunting,
Yeah.
But and from there I was just this is so wrong. They're just not respecting the law, and therefore, and if the police aren't going to enforce what is the law, there's no debating the law, then I will, and every other Sab, I have a huge amount of respect for, stand in the way and say this is not okay. I'm not gonna I'm not going to let you break the law. I'm going to stand there and make sure you don't break the law, and you don't abuse animals for fun, especially in like Ponzi red jackets.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how I got involved in sabbing, I guess. And then just from there, it's just like the injustice when it came to the animals, and the fact that these are pretty much like organized criminal gangs, really. There's not a huge difference, and that just inspires me, and inspired me, so I just, every single time DCHS went out, which is Devon County Hunt Sabs, I went out with them, and before I knew it, I was, one of the team, so to speak.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So have you been out pretty regularly then since you first started?
Yeah. So this is my first season, so I've only done a year of sabbing.
Right. Yeah.
But I mean, unfortunately, Devon is saturated with hunts. There is like hunts literally everywhere you turn. Sometimes we'd stab a hunt, pack it up. 5 minutes later, we would be at another hunt because of that. Literally, like they're round the corner from each other. And yeah, so I went out pretty much every week, sometimes 2-3 times a week, depending, if we had the numbers, because often it's quite hard to get the numbers, especially during the weekday, because most of us do work, funny enough.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm not a benefit scrounger. Yeah, and the season in Devon is quite a lot longer than it is in the southeast.
Yeah.
And I've done a bit of, so when I've gone back to my parents over Christmas and Easter time here, and when I've been there, I've joined Croydon Hunt Sabs, and gone out with them. So I've pretty much been out every week, really, this season.
Was that Croydon Hunt Sabs? Sorry.
Yeah, Croydon Hunt Sabs. So they're kind of like my other sub group, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And obviously, like you said, there are like the southwest is famously kind of filled to the brim with hunts. One of the most notable things about the southwest is obviously there is fox hunting down there, but it's also one of the few places which still has stag hounds. Are you involved in have you stabbed both, basically? Are you involved in stabbing both?
We packed up a beagle pack once on Exmoor, and we happened to bump into the Exmoor staghounds or buckhounds. But basically, they're like, there's hundreds of them, like hundreds of quarters and stuff. The moor it's really hard to stab on a moor because of the long distances. There's no like hedges or fences, etc., which hold slow the hunt down. It is very much a very long distance, and it's very hard to keep up on foot, especially as there's very few roads. So we tend to do what is most effective, and we tend to just focus on fox hunts if we can.
Yeah.
Purely because it saves the most lives. Unfortunately, there isn't enough SAB groups to do every single hunt in Devon, so we kind of have to prioritise where ourselves and our resources would be best used, and rarely is that with the stag hounds, purely on the basis of it's very hard to stab them, but also they tend to be more violent because there's more of them. So really it's foxhounds a lot of the time, because we are spoiled for choice, unfortunately. And then the fox hunts in Devon and the southwest, from my experience in the southeast, they seem to be a lot more scummy, basically. There's a lot of terrier work goes on in the southwest, and it doesn't seem to be any or very little in the southeast, especially from the times I've gone out with the hunts, and also talking to other SABs. I don't think I've ever actually seen a terrier man in the southeast, although I haven't been out anywhere near as much as I have in the southwest. But there are, there are multiple. Some hunts have more terrier men, on quad bikes, more quad bike followers than they do have riders in the southwest.
Right.
Some days it can be like 4 riders and like 6 quad bikes.
Blimey. Okay.
So and it seems that that's the biggest cause of foxes being killed is the sort of like terrier work, that sort of thing, bagging them for later to hunt them again.
Yeah.
Other than obviously like cubbing, which is also like a huge killer of the foxes.
Yeah. As someone from halfway across the country, but in somewhere kind of equally rural, really, certainly the impression that I have of the southwest is, as you kind of describe, is that the hunts and the hunt followers and supporters down there and the people involved with the hunt are a lot. It's a lot more grim and kind of rough and confrontational than often what I have to deal with. So in that respect, it's I imagine your experience of sabbing is very different to mine, and probably demands a bit more bravery.
I wouldn't say that at all. I mean, I don't think it's any more brave, but there's less prestige, I would say, than in the southeast. In the southeast, there's a lot more prestige and a lot more like pageantry, which goes along with it. Whereas in the southwest, especially with some of the hunts, they're very much just purely about the killing, and that's when you get like hunt masters who are actually terrier men, even though it's like the lowest of the low jobs. Some of them are quite high up in the actual hunt, but they just love killing so much that they're terrier men.
Right.
And that's kind of their thing, is the digging out of the fox and that sort of thing. And we do know there are some people in Devon who just like they will do it for free. A lot of them aren't even paid to be the terrier men. They just do it for free out of the love of it. Like, it's a sport in itself for them.
Yeah.
And they are very blatant about it, and the police really just, from my perspective, do not enforce the law. Whether that's because they don't understand the law or whether they just don't feel its importance. When it comes to terrier work especially, they continually turn a blind eye to it. We've had it in cases where they've driven off and they've left their terriers underground with their, and the terriers come out, and we've got this terrier in our arms and it's got a GPS collar, and we've got footage of all of this. You hand it over to the police and they go, oh well, they just shrug it off basically. Which is ludicrous. It not only is it clearly evidence of fox hunting, the simple fact is, that there's no need for a terrier, especially with a GPS collar, etc., to go down a hole if you're trail hunting.
Yeah.
The whole thing is a joke, and to the police they just I don't know if it is like bias or corruption, but it is definitely failing to enforce the law. And so the terrier work is a really big part of hunting in the southwest, and they're blatant about it as well. I don't know if anyone has seen, but there was a recent news article in Devon Live, and it was the Exeter hunt digging out a badger set.
Right.
And they did it right in front of our group, like right in front of us. They just carried on digging. And if you watch the video, they actually, one of the terriermen says the other one, like, oh, there's a fox. Like, the terrier was actually on the fox. And their justification was, well, they didn't kill the fox that time, so it's like, okay. And they didn't even cover their faces. And all of that footage is like, you can watch it online. It's about 20 minutes long, so. And from my understanding, the police have had a word with them or something or other. Even though it's quite clear what they're doing, it's quite clear they're hunting foxes. And the police still do not enforce what to me is quite obvious, like blatant law breaking.
Quick! The thicket!
Kill the foxes then. Kill it, did they? No, but why do you kill them? Why do you hunt them?
Why do you come out annoying us?
No, it's a serious question. Yeah?
We don't, we hunt trails. 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 We hunt trails.
You hunt trails?
Yeah.
So you have terriers and shovels and...
It's a legal part of it now.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't sound very legal to me.
Well, it is.
Are you able to talk a little bit about how you became involved in I guess, local or parliamentary politics, and kind of, yeah, how that happened and when?
Yeah, sure. So I moved to Exeter, 3 or 4 years ago now, and basically I was a member of the Labour Party, and I ran in the city centre ward, and I spoke to me and my colleagues. We spoke to pretty much the majority of the constituency, listening to the concerns they had, and even before we were elected, we dealt with their casework. We pretty much just got things sorted, really. Making sure people's bins were collected, or looking into crime. Crime's quite a big deal in the city centre of Exeter for our constituents.
Yeah.
And when it came to election day, I guess people felt they were confident enough in voting for us. There was a bit of a backlash in the sense that, I mean, at the time I was only 18 when I was elected,
Right.
So there was quite a bit of negativity in that sense, which is understandable. I like to think that we've been able to show that actually we are competent. My colleague was recently up for election very recently on the 3rd, and he increased his majority quite significantly.
Okay.
So yeah, we're pretty strong in Exeter. That's pretty much it, really. How I got involved in politics, really. Just join the Labour Party, and every so many years there'll be an election, and you can run under the Labour Party banner, and if people like you,
yeah,
they can elect you.
Oh, sorry, go on.
Well, I was going to say, regarding my role as in hunt activism, I think it's really important that when you are a politician, that you are really open about all of what you do in your private life and what you do in your public life. I don't personally think that if you're running as a politician, I think you have a duty really to be really honest with your constituents, etc., your voters, on actually your principles and how you feel, and not mislead people. And therefore they can make the decision whether they actually do agree with you and they want you to represent them or not. And I think that's quite a vital part of politics, and that's one of the reasons I decided to speak to the local newspaper, so that my constituents did or were aware or were able to be aware.
Yeah.
That I also opposed hunting in quite an active, direct action kind of way.
Yeah. And did you see? Was there any kind of immediate or tangible reaction to that? Because it was a Devon Live article. That's only the one that I read, where you kind of outed yourself, as it were. Did you see any kind of reaction to that article?
Actually, personally, I had a lot of support. A lot of people got in contact and said, I really agree with you. I live in the area. I think what you're doing is really upstanding. The fact that you're standing up for your principles, etc., is commendable. Sometimes I knock on doors, and people go, I read about you in Devon Live. I think what you're doing is fantastic. We've actually had some activists who've come out door knocking with us, who have come out, partially because of what I've done in the hunting, standing up for against hunting. Interestingly enough, I've not ever, apart from one individual from I would say a pro-hunting Facebook group, where because I think dialogue is really important, and I try and have dialogue even when I'm hunt sabbing. I try and build up dialogue with the followers, etc., if I can. And so I offered, in the article, I said, please get in contact. If you disagree with me, I'm always open to discussion. I don't want to be closed-minded. I want to fully understand everyone's point of view. But apart from one individual who passed on questions from the group to me and I answered them on Facebook, apart from that, I've not had any direct contact with anyone who disagrees with what I'm doing. Interestingly enough, though, because my contact details are online, so people can quite easily get in contact with me. So I was expecting quite a lot of negative feedback, but none so far. On the other hand, as a council, we have received quite a few requests for me to resign or be kicked out of the council, basically, because it's well, they just don't think that a public representative should be doing that sort of thing.
Right.
However, I'm not breaking the law. I don't feel I'm not ashamed of what I'm doing. I don't think anyone who is involved in hunt sabbing should be ashamed of what we're doing, because we are working within the law to enforce the law, to make sure the law is kept abided by, and that animals aren't abused for fun. And the British public overwhelmingly support what we're doing, and it does not go against council code of conduct. It does. I'm not using my position as a councillor in any way, shape, or form regarding my activism as a hunting. They're very, very separate identities, and they don't cross over really at all.
Yeah.
And I make sure that that's the case, because I think that's really important. Because I'm not when I'm out hunt sabbing, I'm not there as a councillor. I'm not there as a representative of people. I'm there as myself and my own opinions.
Yeah.
And when I'm a councillor and sitting on committees, etc., I'm there as a representative of my constituents. And if there ever was, so far there hasn't been, but if there ever was a conflict of interest, then I would remove myself from that conflict, which is stipulated by our code of conduct. So although we've had quite a lot, I believe, someone mentioned a few hundred. I don't know if that's true, but a huge amount of people did get in contact and suggest that I shouldn't be allowed to be in my role. But I guess that's up to my electorate to vote for me or not. It's not really up to anyone else who doesn't live in Exeter and doesn't live in St David's to have an opinion on that, really.
Yeah.
If my constituents don't like it, they can vote me out, and that's the case. That's how democracy works. If you don't like the person who represents you, you can unelect them. Basically, you can kick them out of office if that's the case. And if you do like it, which seems to be the case, it seems to be a vote winner, especially within obviously my constituent. As a member of the Labour Party, it tends to be, if you're a Labour base, you probably are against fox hunting. There are people in the Labour Party who are pro fox hunting, but the majority aren't. So it tends to be quite a strong vote winner than a vote loser, to be honest. So politically, it's not really harmed me or my colleagues, I don't believe.
No.
Which was a big concern of mine, not for myself, but for my colleagues. I didn't want to cause any electoral issues from them, but that's not been the case at all.
No.
It's been overwhelmingly positive, to be honest.
Yeah, and it's not even that unique a position, I don't think. Certainly in my it's not my local area, but in the same county that I'm in, there is a master of the hunt who's also a councillor for the Conservatives.
Which I think is more shocking, to be honest. These organisations are pretty clearly quite criminal. The hunt, there's a councillor involved in that. There are councillors. To be fair, he's a Waterford parish councillor. So he's a bit of a different level, and they have less responsibility, etc.
Cunning devils are trying to confuse the hounds.
Well, one of the things that it said in the Devon Live article, it said that one of the things that motivated you was a case where a huntsman was making sexually suggestive comments to a sub. Was that the Charles Carter case?
Wasn't. I haven't heard of that case. Oh,
okay. Because that was again, a councillor who was a huntsman. Yeah.
Yes, I do know that case. Sorry, I forgot the name of it. Yeah, and he was suspended. I believe is he back in the council? I can't remember.
I'm not 100% to be honest.
Or maybe because he was investigated by the police or something, wasn't he? I think there might have been dropped the harassment or whatever the charges were against.
Yeah.
I think that sort of behaviour is, it's quite backwards. We experience quite a lot of that in Devon, to be honest. There's a lot of the female tabs do get quite a lot of sexually inappropriate kind of questions, and also there can sometimes be cases where people sexually grab, assault in a sense, sabs, which is quite disgusting, really.
Yeah.
So there is that element to it, and yeah, that really brought my eyes. I think it was the first time when it came up in my news feed, hunt sabbing, because I wasn't aware at that point of hunt sabs. I don't think when it kind of blew up, and that was quite viral, wasn't it? It was shared quite a lot.
Yeah.
Partially, I think, because of the fact that he was a conservative. But that's not to say that not all conservatives are pro hunting, because that's simply not the case. You've got Blue Fox. Is it Blue Fox?
Yeah.
And they're very much on the same side of of obeying the law, and the law is the law, and you just you don't have the right to break the law, and you should feel the same weight of the law as everyone else. And that actually hunting should be in the past. It's a barbaric and uncivilized abuse of animals for fun, and it really should be in the past and not what it is today.
Yeah.
Going on.
And with that in mind, and to kind of go back to a little bit about what you're saying earlier, that you try and draw a line between your role as a SAB and your role as a councillor representing your constituent. Do you also feel that there is a degree of that you're able to kind of pursue a degree of kind of animal rights or anti-hunting stuff in your role as a councillor, perhaps in the sense that many of your constituents are anti-hunt, for example?
Yeah. To be honest, with my constituency is the city centre of Exeter, pretty much. So rarely do we have issues regarding hunting or that sort of thing. To be honest, when it comes to voting on things, sometimes we do come across animal rights kind of focused regulation.
Yeah.
Excuse me. And obviously I vote along party lines, and when we discuss policies, etc. I do come from it. As a vegan, I do have a certain perspective on what's okay and what's not okay, and I try and put that forward. But again, there is a clear line between when it comes to hunting, especially, that would never overlap, really.
Yeah.
We never really come across any sort of legislation regarding hunting. However, recently there was a tightening up of regulations regarding puppy farms, or people breeding puppies for profit in Exeter. So now, if you have on a single property, if you have a bitch, or I think it can be the same bitch, or it can be more than one bitch.
Yeah.
That is pregnant more than twice. If you have a pregnant dog if you have a dog pregnancy more than twice in the same year on a single property, then it becomes officially a puppy farm, and then you require a license, and that sort of thing. So there is some things where we can have a positive impact for Exeter and its animals. But again, City Council, the powers we have are quite limited in that kind of aspect, especially as we are a city. Animals aren't a huge part of city life, everyday city life. But puppy farming is about as close as one would get to sort of like animal-focused legislation, basically.
Okay.
But I'm actually really proud of that, that Exeter does do that, and that we have that sort of regulation, because that is at the top of the country when it comes to puppy breeding, etc. Really, from my knowledge, there isn't any other council who's gone further. I would actually like to go even further than that. I think that if you have more than one pregnancy in your property in a year, I don't really think that can be accidental. I think that's intentional, and I think that would, However, there are legal barriers, I believe, from my understanding, when this was scrutinised, to making it any stronger. And we worked with the Dogs Trust, and that was on the recommendation of the Dogs Trust. They produced a report for us, and they suggested that this would be the best way of improving the situation of like puppy farming, etc. So I'm really proud that as a council we've managed to have a small, but for some animals, for the dogs, a big impact on the way they're treated.
Yeah.
Because once they are become a legal puppy farm, then they have to abide by a lot more regulation, inspections, etc. So, local politics, you can have a marginal positive impact on the quality of the local animals, I guess, of their lives. But really, nationally, a lot of it comes from Parliament, unfortunately. Especially when it comes to animal sort of legislation, that's all pretty parliamentary, and it's all very centralised still. Which could be seen as a good thing, could be seen as a bad thing.
Maybe that's a good point to kind of ask a little bit more about that then, on kind of your thoughts on the Labour Party, or the kind of the PLP, and its positions on various animal rights or animal welfare causes. Obviously, I'm not expecting you to speak as for everyone in Labour, but as someone who is an individual representative of that party. Do you have any thoughts on Labour today, and how it might, or how the Labour Party has like a good relationship with kind of anti-hunting?
Well, I think the Labour Party has always had a long history of sort of emancipation of oppressed kind of groups, whether that's humans or animals. And when it comes to hunting, especially in the last couple of decades, there was quite a continuous effort from different Labour MPs to push through a hunting ban. There is, if you go on if you Google like the Hunting Act and the BBC, it has quite a good like timeline of different years and dates of the progress made with the Hunting Act. And in the 90s and in the early 2000s, it was very much a Labour driven sort of progress on the Hunting Act. And I don't believe that the Hunting Act would have come into place if it wasn't for the Labour Party. That's not to say there weren't Conservatives who voted for the ban. It's just to say that I don't think the heads of the Conservative Party would have allowed that sort of thing to have been motioned, in the first place and tabled. We, at the moment, I personally think we have a really strong progressive plan if the Labour Party nationally is elected, to strengthen the Hunting Act, close all of these loopholes that pretty much allow hunting to continue as it did in the past, and unfortunately that's thanks to Tony Blair. And I think most of the listeners will know that it was Tony Blair who made sure that the Hunting Act wasn't able to be properly enforced. And that it was full of loopholes. I believe he had a wager with Prince Philip, or was it Prince Charles? And where he said that hunting would continue after he left office, even with the Act, in force.
Right.
And that is the case, and the reason for that is because he went to Italy, and while he was in Italy, he spoke to a secretary of a hunt. He persuaded him that hunting should continue, and from that point onwards, you can read his autobiography, and yeah, he was never going to let it come into force a full actual ban on hunting. So the Labour Party as a whole, each individual, most of the MPs, most of the members have always, especially in recent years, in the last few decades, have really opposed fox hunting and other forms of blood sports. However, Tony Blair did weaken that act. But I guess one could say that without the Labour government in the first place, there wouldn't be an act at all, and it would have continued. Because let's be honest, every Conservative Prime Minister since then, so David Cameron and Theresa May, both of them have been extremely pro-hunting, and I would imagine they would never have, tabled a bill to ban hunting. So if it wasn't for the Labour Party, I don't think there would be a ban on hunting. Or fox hunting with hounds. And what I would suggest, I imagine a lot of the people who listen to this podcast and hunt sabs, they probably do vote Labour or Green. What I would suggest is if you're not satisfied with your individual, because I know there are Labour MPs or politicians in the party who don't share our a disagreement with this type of barbarity, who are pro fox hunting, like Kate Hoey, who is pro fox hunting. Fundamentally, it is a hard decision to make whether you're going to vote Labour or not. I would suggest that having more Labour MPs increases the chance that we'll be able to strengthen the bill. And I know that if you can possibly get a Labour MP into Parliament over a Conservative, that shouldn't. It's more likely that animal rights and that sort of thing will be progressed. Maybe not to the same extent as it would under the Green Party or another party, but it would help the cause. I would suggest if you do have if you have an MP who is pro fox hunting, etc., there's nothing stopping you from getting in contact with them and talking to them and trying to change their opinion. And also, if you do have to vote for a councillor or an MP, etc., and you disagree with some of what their stance is, you can say, you can write to them and say, look, I voted for you, but I actually disagree with quite a lot of this. Because otherwise it can sometimes feel, if you get a lot of votes and no one tells you why, it might not be because people agree with you, but you may feel that you have the mandate when you don't actually have the mandate to pursue your own personal opinions. So I would say be really vocal, and don't stop being vocal with your local representatives or your representatives nationally. Because it is up to constituents really to chase this and make sure that MPs continue to fight for an actual ban on hunting. and I would say voting for Labour, obviously as I am part of the Labour Party, is the best way of doing that. Purely because we're really the only party that has a chance of, banning hunting for good. And I think that'd be a huge benefit. And if anyone is interested in more detail in the Labour Party's position at the moment on hunting and other sort of animal concerns, they did publish an animal welfare plan recently, which specifically goes through a lot of key points that the Labour Party would like to pursue if they were in office.
Yeah.
And there's other things like, it would end the badger cull, which would be a huge weight off our shoulders, which is it's a massive time-consuming part of our lives, and that sort of thing would make a big difference for the badgers and for the sows.
Yeah.
We get 6 weeks back of our life each year.
So I think most SABs who've kind of spent a bit of time out in the field would have experienced the police, and I think I don't know, I believe that probably most SABs' experiences with the police has been largely negative, both in the past and today. And my personal thoughts are that as sabbing would probably be, my sabbing would be more effective, our group sabbing would be more effective if simply the police kind of didn't interfere. That we'd be more effective in sabbing if we weren't constantly being harassed by police, them slowing us down by checking tyre tread depth and insurance details and stupid shit like that. And as a result, my kind of personal political position is I don't have a great deal of faith in governments or states, and so I'm quite kind of dubious about the possibility of a Labour government, but not necessarily just Labour, kind of any government actually being able to introduce laws that have a meaningful impact on being able to help foxes, hares, deer escape, and also with kind of I was also brought to mind the fact that in the manifesto, in the election manifesto, Labour obviously kind of promised to introduce loads more police, which I personally don't think is a great thing. I'm just wondering what your thoughts are on kind of that line of thinking, especially because I can imagine that there's certainly going to be some people, some SABs listening to this who may also think along those lines. And what that means for kind of being mainstream politics and hunt sabotage and the Hunting Act and the law, and it's quite a big question, I guess, but I don't know if you have any.
No, so before I came into so I grew up in a police household. So before I got involved in sort of animal rights activism, I always had a very positive opinion of the police, because that's the world I grew up in, and that's the kind of people I grew up around. So I think sometimes we can forget that police are actually just human beings in a uniform, and that they do have a lot on their plate. But I do agree, and I'm becoming very frustrated with Devon and Cornwall police personally. I've not really had a huge dealing with other police forces. I dealt with Surrey police once, and actually, to be fair, they were genuinely okay with me. At first, they tried to stop me from accessing a field, and I had to tell them the law basically regarding trespassing and whether they were allowed to stop me or not. But actually, after that, they were generally okay, and we had a long chat. I do think that what I would like to see is the police enforce the law, and I think the police do have a duty to enforce the law. And if the law was tightened and there was loopholes closed and it was much more clearer, because hunting is a really, unless it takes many years to fully understand what's going on in a hunt. Every huntsman has a different way of different type of pool. Every huntsman has a different way he controls his hounds. So whether a huntsman is telling his hounds to stop or to hunt on, that can be quite a difficult. If you have no clue really about hunting, that can be quite a difficult thing to tell. So I do understand from the police perspective, it is quite a complicated issue, and I would like to see personally a creation of some sort of national-wide focused body of police that focus on sort of animal crime, because these things do kind of transgress like county lines. I would like to think the police would uphold the law if it was the case, but I do understand what you're saying, and we deal with that a lot. And I often what pisses me off the most, to be honest, is either the law is clearly being broken right in front of them and they choose not to enforce it, or as you said, they're checking your license, making sure we're insured, following us around, searching us or whatever, whilst down the road there's a quad bike with no number plates, got 5 terrier men on, all in black harleys, terriers on, and it's just like, hang on a minute, like and then they refuse to do anything about that. They go, oh, we'll do that in slow time. I've got his details or whatever, and I'm just like, there's clearly a road traffic offence. Well, that's another thing, is we call the police out, and they'll go to the hunters first, and they'll have a chat with them. Even though they didn't call the police out, we called the police out because they were being violent towards us.
Yeah.
And then we try and explain to them what's happened, and then they start talking about fox hunting, etc. Because we don't report fox hunting anymore, really, because it's just pointless. The police won't do anything about it. It's just a waste of our time, because they won't enforce it on. So when we call the police, it's to do with violence, basically, or that sort of thing, where we're extremely intimidated or we have been assaulted, and that happens pretty much weekly in Durban. And as soon as police come out, they have this opinion that we're some sort of criminals, and then when we try and explain to them like this assault has happened, for some reason they want to talk about fox hunting and the Hunting Act and go, well, there's no fox hunting. We're like, well, we actually called you out because they assaulted us. We didn't call you out because of fox hunting. Right. And then for some reason they don't seem to think that. We had an armed response officer once say to us, well, you're coming out here, so you should expect this sort of thing after we've been assaulted.
Yeah. And
what I think is actually was ludicrous, because firstly, clearly, being assaulted is clearly breaking the law. But unlike the police, we're just citizens. We don't have stab vests, etc. We don't have these sort of things to protect us. So when we're assaulted, it's a lot more scary, because we don't know what's going to happen next. We might only be head-butted, but how do we know that's not going to escalate into something else? And that can be really scary, to be honest. Sometimes, we're like, even though on footage, sometimes it doesn't come out. The tenseness and how scary a situation can be in the present can sometimes be quite hard to capture on footage.
Yeah, definitely.
And to show that. Because I think a lot of the time when you're looking at that footage, it's like, well, I'm safe now. In that zone, you're like, what's going to happen next? Am I going to get punched or whatever? Am I going to get head-butted again? Am I going to get, driven into it, and that sort of thing? And I would like the police to treat us with equal consideration, but that doesn't seem to happen. Ironically, I once got told to get off my high horse. After I called them for, 3 4x4s had blocked in our vehicle and wouldn't let it go for about an hour or so.
All right.
He told me to get off my high horse as soon as I got out of the car. I said, because he got out of the car and I said, like, hey, like, this is what's happened, I called you. And the first thing he said to me before he, like, made sure, like, whatever, anything else, he said, get off your high horse. And I'm like, what?
Brilliant.
Or we've had other situations where officers have, I asked for the warrant number of a police officer. So by law, every police officer must give you their warrant number. And you have every right to film a police officer. They can't stop you from filming them. And I had an interaction with an officer who kept saying, I'm not going to, like, we reported the crime, he turned up and he said, I'm not talking to you unless you turn the camera off. And it's our legal right to film the officers, because we do have a lot of issues with the officers, you know, as mentioned. And we want to, you know, we for our own safety, basically, and making, you know, we will film. And it got to the point where this officer not only wouldn't give me his warrant number and kept walking off, but because it was dark at this point, it was, you know, winter time, he got his torch out and started shining it in my eyes.
Right. God.
Even though all I'd asked him to do was give me his warrant number, which he is by law required to do, and it's that kind of what's the word? Pretentiousness. You know, that condescending type of behaviour, where they feel like they don't have to treat us like citizens when they should and they must. And I've had other police officers in front of me, you know, tell me, because I'm a man, that my female colleague, you know, I need to control her. I need to make sure, like, she calms down, etc.
Oh, God.
You know, and that sort of thing is just disgusting, really.
Yeah.
And you lose all faith in the police. But what I would say is, I disagree that I would like the police not to not get involved, etc. Because we do have that in Devon and Cornwall. A lot of the time, police are kind of like, oh well, we won't do anything. Like, they won't enforce the law on either side, kind of thing. And what that just leads to is escalation of violence each year. And there seems, in Devon especially, there seems to be a growing tendency towards violence across the scale,
right,
because there isn't that sort of enforcement. There isn't that sort of, like, punishment for breaking the law. I'm just trying to think if I can talk about this or not. I think I can talk about this. Yeah, so recently we were, a group of us were basically ambushed. And at first they started chucking snowballs, and it became rocks. And then it became, like, physical punching and smashing the cameras and driving into us on a public right of way. And all the footage was handed over to the police. And speaking to the police officer, the biggest issue was that he was going to pursue was the fact that they threw a snowball at us. That was the common assault there. And his thinking was, well, even though I kept asking them to stop, and I kept asking them, I said, please refrain, like, stop doing this, please, you know, in as tight as manner as possible. Apparently, we were also causing, you know, breaking some sediment. We could get retaliation. You know, accusations put out against us, even though we provided multiple different angles of footage, etc. And that's the sort of thing which is quite frustrating. It's quite clear there is quite a serious incident going on, and they won't really tackle it, and they're going to deal with a snowball being thrown at someone.
Yeah.
Which is ludicrous, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And I feel when the police don't, when people feel immune from the law, and I think that's pretty much the case now. I've had huntsmen on camera tell me that the police think that the whole thing's a fucking joke, and they won't won't enforce the law. And I think when it gets to that point, that's when you have really, you know, not only are you risking, you know, the lives of foxes, etc., and animals, but also you're putting, you know, people in danger as well. Even when they're on public property or, you know, public land, etc. You know, you can't. You don't feel safe at all, and I think that's because people aren't really being held account for their actions. Well, that's what it feels like anyway.
Yeah.
So to be honest, I just like the police did their job, really.
Yeah.
You know, I do understand there's other, like, opinions, and, you know, some people are anarchists or whatever, and feel the police are always bad. But if the police just did their job, I mean, we wouldn't really have this issue around fox hunting in the first place.
Do you see or kind of see a way that, for example, a Labour government would help better that situation in the way that you've described?
Well, I mean, if they improved the law so it was easier for the police to act on, I think that would be a massive step forward. I would also suggest that better regulation, better oversight into the police is really important. It's hard because, obviously, fundamentally, it's about officers doing their jobs correctly. I imagine if the law was strengthened and the police continued not to enforce the law, and not to be equal in their way of dealing with people, I imagine there would be recourse to suggest better regulation, a better watchdog, a more powerful watchdog of the police force. And I think that would improve with Labour. I think there's a better chance of that happening under Labour than that is under Conservatives, especially when it comes to fox hunting and hunting, because we all know Theresa May's position, and there are a lot of people in the Conservative Party, especially key public figures like Boris Johnson, and even backbenchers who are quite well known, like he's a Somerset MP, Jacob Rees-Mogg. Who are all extremely pro-fox hunting.
Oh God,
So let's be honest here. If the police are failing to enforce the law, it's not going to be on Jacob Rees-Mogg's priority list.
No.
To make sure the police are reviewed and improved on that situation. So I would suggest that you're not going to get rid of if you don't like government, like that's not going to be a great solution to you, but it's not going to get better anyway in this current situation, but it probably will get better under Labour. And I know people in the Labour Party, etc., and I know they're decent human beings, and there are a lot of people in the Labour Party who are active, activists, local politicians, etc., who are climbing up the ranks, who are on our side. I know there's actually quite a lot of vegans in the Labour Party as well. So I think there is definitely, especially at the younger end of the party, there is this growing proportion of people who are, quite focused and quite aware and educated on animal rights and the abuses that go on in the country. And I think that can only get better if we continue to support that sort of, that sort of progress, really.
I'm still on it. I'm in the toilets. I think she's gone fox hunting. So, yeah, you know about me and fox hunting. That's a no-no.
Did you have any particular memorable incidences while sabbing that you wanted to share? Apart from you've already mentioned a few, but did you have any others that you wanted to share from you said this is your kind of your first full season. Is there anything that stood out?
Each week is quite similar each week. What I would say is we have a pretty good way of sabbing. I think everywhere has a different way of sabbing. I found that's been really interesting, actually, because I've done a bit of sabbing in the southwest and in the southeast. There is quite a distinct difference in how different groups are effective, and that does vary. Because each hunt is different. Like some hunts are that you do have to be a lot more careful around safety, so you have to work in high numbers. But I can't really think of. It's kind of hard to each week is quite an adventure, and there's lots of stuff goes on each time you go out. Sabbing, it seems something always occurs that is quite extreme. But it's hard to pick out one event. What I would say is most shocking is the violence, to be honest, and the violence towards humans and animals, and that includes their own hunting hounds. The sort of way that I've seen some hunts do have a little bit more treat their hounds a little bit better, but often we do see emancipated hounds, not emancipated, emaciated, emaciated hounds. I once was at a meet near Exeter. It's actually Exeter's local hunt, and someone kept punching one of the hounds in the head. And this kind of thing is just people just go, they just turn a complete blind eye to it. Or there are other, there's a huntsman in Devon who's very proud of his hounds, He always goes on about how his hounds are the best hounds and how like so the huntsman down the road at this hunt has like terrible hounds, and yet his own hounds are like, you know, one of them can't see out one of their eyes. They've got this huge cancerous growth growing. You know, some of them don't have, you know, you can see their ribs really, really obviously. But that's another thing actually, is it is interesting. You can tell which hounds are looked after to some extent and which ones aren't, because some of them are really friendly and they're not scared of humans. And there are other ones who are quite scared of you, and they don't like going near you. And I imagine that's because they're not treated very well at all by the humans they do know, and therefore they try and stay away from people. To be honest, I think the biggest thing to me is it's shocking the level, the openness of the type of and the organisation of this like and of the crimes being committed really in this country. And I really do feel that this sort of behaviour leads to other sort of crimes and isn't acceptable. And it shouldn't be acceptable. And as a society, we've agreed that actually fox hunting especially shouldn't happen anymore, but it still does.
Do you have any thoughts on why, you know, like 13 years after the Hunting Act, and you know, it's certainly it's been 55 years since the HSA was kind of first established as it exists today. Why hunting is still going on despite massive public opposition and even an apparently ineffective law that's supposed to have stopped it. Why do hunters and the hunt community still cling to that?
Well, I think one of the big reasons is actually a bad law. You know, is really no law at all. And I think the problem with the act at the moment is to the average, you know, person in public thought something is banned, and that's what I thought. So most people don't think it goes on, and they are not aware. I know a lot of vegans, you know, who are not aware of hunting going on, which is surprising. And I think that's probably one of the biggest issues is people think that's been done, that's been dealt with, and that we can move on as a society. And that's been that's been laid to rest in the past, but unfortunately it hasn't. You know, I think the Countryside Alliance, which obviously used to be the British Field Sports Society, that is an extremely effective organisation at PR. They're very, very good at what they do, and they're very good at sowing confusion and doubt. I think doubt is a really big issue because the way the law is structured and the lack of understanding of hunting means it's very hard to enforce the law because there's quite a lot of doubt surrounding what's going on, what the law exactly refers to, and whether what that action that hunter's doing is actually illegal or not. So I think a clearer law would help put hunting to rest. And I think, so primarily, I think the fact that the law exists and the way it does actually makes the situation quite bad and continues this sort of continuous hunting, really. Because it shrouds, you know, it cloaks hunting. It makes most people think it doesn't happen, and at the same time, it allows real, hunters to continue to hunt. And that's kind of the worst possible situation, really. In some ways it protects the hunting community because everyone else doesn't think it goes on anymore. And unless you are involved actually in the hunting community, you know, you don't have a clue it does go on. And therefore, and the thing is, if you are involved in the hunting community, you're most likely to be pro-hunting. And I think the good thing about sabbing, especially nowadays, is the use of technology, because it's getting out there, getting that information out there, but actually it's just continuing to go on. But I think, you know, when it comes to to sabs like capturing footage, etc., it's actually really, really hard to capture what's going on. Because no one's got any training or whatever, and there's someone just with a camcorder, etc., trying to follow up a load of people on horses and dogs, on land where we get assaulted, etc., and confronted, etc. So there's a huge issue of trying to capture footage in the first place. And I think as technology goes on, it'll become even easier. I hope to see like drones, etc., being used. I think that would be pretty effective at continuously monitoring hunts. But I do think it's partially because the Countryside Alliance is very effective at what they do, and the Hunting Act kind of protects and hides hunting from the British public as a whole. And makes it seem like hunting is something in the past, so to speak. But yeah.
Okay. Brilliant. Did you have anything that you wanted to say, just to kind of close out?
I guess if anyone has any thoughts, definitely reach out to me and have a chat with me, whether you agree with what I said or not. I think it'd be awesome to speak to other people. I know most people listening to our sabs, but again, that'd be awesome. Definitely reach out to me. Don't be worried about reaching out to me.
What's the best way for people to do that?
What's the best way? You can if you've got Twitter, you can you can follow me if you want, or you can just message me. And my Twitter is at CLLR, which is short for Councillor. So at Councillor Lewis Keane. Otherwise, you can hit me up on Facebook. I wouldn't suggest using my government, my councillor's details, because that's not really appropriate in the sense that it's not really related to council.
No.
They do it for that way, but get hold of me on social media because that's perfectly acceptable, and that'd be awesome. Like, honestly.
So, are you going to go on a second date?
Fox hunting.
I sense that might be
Yes.
but even though I don't really
know.
like foxes, it's like...
I know, well...
It's really, really lovely to meet you too. If it was something that I did regularly and was a big part of my life, then I can understand why that might be a complete deal breaker for you, because you obviously feel very strongly about it. It was something that I grew up with when I was younger, occasionally happened to go to as part of a kind of country lifestyle. It's not something I can really do much about.
Yeah. That's right. Agree to disagree on that one.